Oh, mijn piepje dan. Ja, het is dat, het is dat.
Ja, ik denk misschien een terugkomen uit minder druk.
Ja, moet je toch passeren, hè?
Maar wie kan het gewoon wat op een afgelopen?
Gewoon ze beter eigenlijk terug gaan, maar dat is gezegd, hè.
Oké. Dat is ook al wat beter, was dat dan niet?
Ik denk dat.
Ja, misschien wel beter met langtoets gaan, maar
Daar
eigenlijk.
is
Restrooms, ja. Nog wel naartoe dan, hè.
Wat over doen? Wat ging er alles doen? Wat ging er iets te eten en drinken? Wat nog wat vliegen?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start our walking tour of the Rocket Garden. If you can hear the sound of my voice and would like to join us, we are meeting right by the up ramp to Heroes and Legends, which today is our entrance for the Rocket Garden. For those of you already here, welcome. My name is Richard. I am a communicator here with the Kennedy Space Center. Let's start walking into the garden. So we're going to kind of walk through this way. As we do that, let me answer the number one question that many people have when they get here. And that is, are you familiar that Gemini means twins? The Gemini capsule held 2 astronauts. Take a look at the big silver rocket in front of us here. This is the Titan II rocket. Again, it was originally built as an intercontinental ballistic missile. But if you look way at the top of that one, that black thing up at the top, that is the Mercury capsule. Excuse me, the Gemini capsule. Well, we had a lot of firsts that were part of the Gemini program. We had our first American spacewalker. That was Ed White with the flight of Gemini 4. We had our first rendezvous in space where there were 2 Gemini capsules in orbit at the same time. Gemini 6 and Gemini 7. And those 2 capsules never physically touched.
That's a walking guide tour of the Rocket Garden.
Speaking of Gemini 7, it was at that point in time the longest range Gemini 7
Ja, dat hebben we ook zoeken, hè.
We also have a mock-up of the Gemini capsule at 203 on the ground. You can check that out a little bit later. 2 seats in there. I want you to imagine sitting next to someone else in that amount of space for 14 days. Now remember, you can't stand up during that time. You have to work with that person, sleep with that person, eat with that person. You can drink associated eating with that person, so you get them on that. Anybody here think they can do that for 14 days? No, yeah, you got it. Me neither. No, guys.
I get started.
I always like programs.
Heb je ook veel gehad?
I built from scratch, essentially, a balsa wood. We could go down to the hobby shop and buy things like that.
I love putting together model airplanes. We could not have opportunities to do this flying models.
some time. The three of us were told to take off for combat air patrol over the task force. I was the first off, went up with ship forward for about 2 minutes.
Let's move out everybody's way real quick because we're blocking.
Dat is zo'n controlcentrum, hè? Mooi.
Downstairs with my feet down, so I would just float out. And I just got the top half of my body out. I stuck my head out into truly a different world, if you will. My job was to crawl hand over hand to get back to the back of the spacecraft. I had nothing really to hold on to except a couple of handlebars. You are the most helpless creature in the world. On the end of a string floating in zero gravity in space.
We were hopping and pumping, and we got a heck of a time holding the water. He walked to the end, it was 25 minutes. And we would be 20 slaves.
We lost guy. Ja, hoeveel plots is het niet?
Niet echt, hè? Ja. wc moet? Waar zijn die winkeltjes hier even dan?
Ja, sinds kom je dat tegen. Mag maar pas doen al een bus toe.
Ja, ja.
Want we zien dat ik mijn 6 kilo.
Ja, juist, juist. Maar ik was er wel aan vergeten die een bus door.
Dat is gewoon zo. Ja, je kunt er zien als ik.
Ja, mij.
Zo, de moeite.
Mooi.
Maar nou, als je daar boven zit, hè?
Ja.
Er zit wel een bom onder u, hè?
Ja, ja. Ja. In de donkere. Schiet hem maar af.
En mij?
Schiet hem maar af, die man.
Dat past er niet in.
Nee. Trek hem maar.
Dat is waar.
Ja, dat zie ik al.
Ja, en dan is er nog eens zwart ook.
Ja. Groot aandeel in hebben.
Waar is de shop?
Ja, echt heel
Ah ja, de shop. Een IMAX theater. Journey into space 3D.
Ja, die bedoel ik dat onder zoveel uur is.
Kunnen we wel even kijken, heb je gezegd?
World's largest enclosed.
De Max boven.
Ah, oké.
25 minuten weg tot omhoog.
The bus, you have to go around the corner to catch the bus tour, so you gotta go see it from there. Go straight around the corner, okay?
Hey, this is what you need to take a selfie in.
What's the front?
On sale, $30 voor een t-shirt.
Nee. En duur? Dat is niet zo duur, hè?
Allemaal duur, hè?
Allemaal duur, hè?
Dat is altijd, hè?
Ja. Ja, heb je gezien wat dat kost?
Ja.
Is het deals, hè? Het deal, $22 voor 3 t-shirts.
Hier ook nog van die gewone t-shirts.
For little dudes.
Dat was maar $20, hè?
Evenveel als die klak. Ja.
Ah, $18 nou, of 19.
Bijna 19, ja. Chargers. Chargers.
Ja, zonne
Now they weigh in at 6 million pounds apiece. They can hold 3 times that weight. And they get 32 to the gallon of diesel fuel. Not too bad, right? That's 32 feet, folks. That's not even the length of this bus. You see this glass enclosed box directly across from the bus? Now that's one of the driver's compartments where if he wanted to go toward us, he'd hop into that seat. But now if he wanted to go in the other direction, he'd have to walk clear across to the other corner, hop into that driver's cab, and go forward. Folks, there's no reverse on that machine. No making a U-turn with it either. Well, here's how it works. It rolls underneath this mobile launch platform in front of us, lifts it up hydraulically off of its 6 stands that it's sitting on, brings that inside the vehicle assembly building and sets it down on 6 stands that are inside there. Then the crawler would come back out here and park. Meanwhile, the technicians would stack the shuttle on top of that platform, placing the tail of the shuttle in between those 2 pods on top, called the tail service masts. Now once that's all done, the crawler then goes back into the VAB, picks up that entire assembly, rolls it out to the launch pad, and sets it down there on 6 pedestals. After the launch of the shuttle, the crawler then goes back up to the pad, picks up this platform, brings it back here, and the whole process starts all over again. Folks, I wanted to point out to you, you see these 3 large square openings that are underneath this platform? That's where the exhaust from the rocket engines comes through the platform and then down into the flame trench located up at the pad. Now, as I mentioned, that crawler weighs in at 6 million pounds. This platform right here, 8 million pounds. By the time they put the shuttle on top, folks, you had a grand total of 18 million pounds, making its way out to the launch pad at the stately speed of just 1 mile per hour. Once it dropped that shuttle off, though, that crawler would race back here at 2 miles per hour. Folks, that trip took 8 hours one way. Now this structure coming up on the right is being built specifically for the new Space Launch System rocket. That's 390 feet up, folks. And it's very similar to what we used back in the Saturn V moon rocket days. The rocket stands right alongside that support structure. The big difference is, though, that the new SLS rocket is going to have solid rocket boosters attached to each side of it, just like the space shuttles. Now there's an opening under there as well, you'll notice, for the flame and exhaust to exit through that platform and then go down into the flame trench up at the pad. This one here is a bit heavier than the one we used back there for the shuttles. It weighs in at 11 million pounds. And folks, you're looking at history because it's from this mobile launch platform that we intend to leave to go to Mars from. Pretty cool, huh? Now coming up on the right hand, next to the VAB, that low building with the tinted windows, that's our Launch Control Center, the LCC for short. It's considered to be the electronic brain of Launch Complex 39. Most of the duties on launch day are performed inside that building by computer because they needed to be millisecond precise, faster than humans could think or even perform. Now folks, we maintain control of the launch here at Kennedy Space Center until it cleared the tower, at which point then we handed it off to Mission Control in Houston, Texas. The doors on that vehicle assembly building, they're the tallest doors in the world, 456 feet tall. It takes 45 minutes just to open up one of those doors, folks. Once they're open, you could slide the Statue of Liberty through there and still have 150 feet left over. Now it's in this high bay number 3 where the doors are open, where they're going to be assembling the new Space Launch System rocket. Now, you couldn't possibly air condition a building that size, and that's why they'll have those high bay doors open to get some cross ventilation through there and allow some additional light in as well. This roadway to our right, they call this the crawler way. It's the road we use to take the rockets and shuttles out to the launch pad. And in order for this road to support 18 million pounds, folks, they had to dig it down 7 feet. And then they refilled it with various layers of fill, topping it off with this Tennessee River rock. Now, they chose this rock because it helped give that crawler traction. Otherwise, it would slip and slide on like it was on ice on a smooth road like what we're driving on. But more importantly, this rock does not spark when it gets crushed and pulverized from that weight. There's no iron in this rock. They say it's almost as hard as diamonds. But think about that, folks. When you're hauling rockets around, the last thing you really want to do is create sparks, right? Now, as we make the turn, you'll see this little guard check on the right-hand side of the bus. Folks, this marks the 3.5 mile boundary. On launch day, no personnel was allowed past this point for safety. The engineers and the scientists had determined all the way back in the Saturn V moon rocket days that had that rocket exploded out on the pad, the debris field would have been 3 miles all the way around. So just to keep it safe, they made the boundary 3.5 miles. Launch pad 41, where United Launch Alliance launches its Atlas V rocket from. Next door to them is Launch Pad 40, where SpaceX also launches its Falcon 9 rocket. And then all the way down in the distance is Launch Pad 37. And that's where United Launch Alliance launches its Delta IV rocket from. And thanks to Hurricane Irma that blew through here last September, we now can see this beautiful view of the Atlantic Ocean. That hurricane knocked down much of the vegetation that was in front of us that used to block this view. But this is considered to be 42 miles of some of the most pristine stretch of beach on the eastern seaboard, folks. Not a condo in sight here. And they say this is some of the best sea turtle nesting area in the world because there's no lights out here to disorient those turtles. Now, 2 miles down to our right is the famous astronaut beach house. That's where the astronauts were able to spend time with their families prior to a launch. And this beach road that we're now on, this was the road that those Apollo astronauts used to race their Corvettes up and down back in the day. As a clean pad design, this is similar to what it would have looked like back in the Saturn V moon rocket days. Now, back in those days, folks, every time they built a new rocket, they built a matching launch pad to go along with it. And we had over 40 different launch pads out here at one time. With this clean pad design, NASA's intention is to not only use this launch pad for the new Space Launch System rocket, but also for commercial companies to come out here and use this as well. This is going to be a very versatile pad, folks, and it's where we intend to leave to go to Mars from. Now, folks, you may have noticed that the fence around each one of those pads A and B, around the perimeter of the pad, is bowed out. It's got an arch on the top. Well, that's to keep the alligators out of the pad. Turns out an alligator can climb right over the top of a 6-foot fence. I've seen it. So they now can only get so far up before they flop back down to the ground. And this is a favorite hangout spot for those gators. And one morning, a woman that worked out here years ago, she heard a clicking sound coming from the hallway, so she went out to investigate. Much to her surprise, she came face to face with a giant gator. They presumed that it came out of this pond and walked up to the double doors. The doors were those automatic doors like your grocery stores have. And that gator walked right on inside. Some days you'll see 6 or 8 of them parked around here, folks, just laying around, but not today. They're in there, though, trust me. Anybody care to go wading around in that water? Well, needless to say, that building does not have automatic doors on it anymore. Now, you may be wondering, what's the deal with all these dump trucks? Well, folks, they are replenishing the sand on the beach that got washed away from Hurricane Irma, and they've been doing this constantly now for a couple of months. They just run convoy of trucks moving sand. Now, just imagine that crawler making its way down this road and up that incline with the Saturn V moon rocket on top of it, keeping the rocket perfectly vertical as it made its way up to the top of that pad. Pretty amazing with 1960s technology, folks. Now, people have asked me why so many of the lightning towers out here. Well, it turns out, folks, that Brevard County, Florida is considered to be the lightning capital of North America. We see more lightning strikes here in one storm than what most cities see in an entire year. Boeing is leasing that one out for their Starliner capsule, and they hope to have that Starliner capsule ready next year to take our astronauts to the International Space Station on, and that will be launched on top of an Atlas V rocket. That big body of water directly out to our left, they call that the turn basin. That's where they brought that big orange tank that they used for the space shuttles. That came in on a barge called the Pegasus from Louisiana by way of the Atlantic Ocean. And that row of buildings up on our left, that is our press site. That's where reporters would come from all over the world to cover the launches of the shuttles and rockets. Old Walter Cronkite used to sit right there in that CBS building back in the day. For those of us that remember old Wally. Now coming up on the right, so folks, you'll see what looks like a little rocket laying horizontally on that red trailer. That is a mock-up of the launch abort system that's going to be used for the Orion space capsule. Now that would be attached to the top of the capsule, and if at launch time there was a problem, they could eject it right off the top of the rocket and land it safely a mile away using a parachute. Behind there is the crew access arm from Pad 39A, and that's where the astronauts would have boarded the space shuttle from. This armored personnel carrier was part of the emergency egress system that was used for the shuttle program. Now how that worked, folks, was each of those launch pads that we just visited used to have 7 cables that were attached to the top of the fixed service structure of the pad, and those cables ran down to the ground like a zip line. Attached to each cable was a basket. Now if at launch time there was a problem, theoretically the astronauts could have gotten out of the shuttle, hopped into a basket, pulled a lever, slid down that cable at 55 miles per hour. Now once they got down to the ground, they had 2 options. The first one was that armored personnel carrier was sitting there running. The first one in would be the driver, last one in would close the door behind them. And they hopefully would have made it off that pad safely. The other option was each of those launch pads had concrete bunkers that the astronauts could have possibly crawled down into and rode out the problem that way. Now would either of those have worked for us, folks? We'll never know. Fortunately, we never had to dry them out. Now, here's our other 2 orbital processing facilities. They're currently now being leased to the Boeing company for their X-37B project, which I'm not allowed to talk about because it's top secret. But you can Google it, folks. It's the world's worst kept secret. They put the name of it right on the building. But once the shuttle landed out at the shuttle landing facility off to our left, past this tree line, it's the longest runway in the world. It's 3 miles long and 300 feet wide. That shuttle was then towed across this road and brought into one of those buildings where the technicians first would have removed any hazardous fuel that was left on board. Then they took the payload off. Then they inspected and replaced any damaged heat tiles, changing out the brakes and the tires. And it took about 4 months just to prepare that shuttle for its next mission. Well, folks, sometimes up ahead on our right, we'll spot some alligators. There was one in here earlier today. This is a pond that they like to hang out in. Sometimes we'll even see manatees in here, folks. If you've never seen a manatee, they look like a giant floating potato. There, let's see what we got today. Nothing but water. Well, there's our destination in front of us, the Apollo Saturn V Center, where there's one of 3 remaining Saturn V moon rockets. There's one in Huntsville, Alabama. There's one in Houston, Texas. But this one you're about to see, folks, used to sit outside in front of that vehicle assembly building. It sat out there for decades. And it had gotten pretty beat up by the weather when they decided 20 years ago to build it a permanent home here. So they refurbished this rocket to Smithsonian specifications. Wait till you see this, friends. You don't realize how big this rocket is until you're standing underneath it. It truly is an awesome sight. But some of the other highlights that you'll see inside this building are the spacesuits that were worn by those Apollo astronauts. Alan Shepard, the first American in space we talked about, he was the commander of the Apollo 14 mission. Take a look at his suit in there on display. It still has the moon dust on it. And the Kitty Hawk, the capsule from that mission, it's also in there on display. And kids, you want to touch a moon rock, you came to the right place. It's right inside this building. You could touch a moon rock. Now, I'll be dropping you off at those silver doors up front, and everyone goes in together, and you'll see a short 8-minute pre-show for the firing room. And then it's on into the firing room where they do a recreation of the Apollo 8 liftoff using the same consoles as they had back in that day. And then it's on in to see that magnificent Saturn V. So folks, there's plenty to see and do here. Take your time and enjoy. There's also a real nice cafeteria. If you're hungry, I recommend. But when it's time to leave, you'll be exiting through the gift shop, which now is a Florida law. I'm joking, folks, it's not a law, but we're going to be right outside that gift shop to pick you up. These buses run every 10 minutes, and it's just a short 10-minute ride back to the visitors complex. So folks, have a look around your seats. Now make sure you have all your belongings with you.
Located at the nose end of the Saturn V rocket, you can relive the experience of Neil Armstrong's historic landing and first steps on the moon. On behalf of NASA and for the comfort, safety, and viewing pleasure of all our guests, we ask that you refrain from flash photography for the duration of our presentation. If you must leave during the presentation, please exit through the doors on your right. Thank you.
Come again.
During this period, once we do get the firing command, the various tanks within the 3 stages of the Saturn V launch vehicle begin to pressurize. We have firing command. The firing command is in. We're now on the automatic sequence. T-minus 2 minutes, 20 seconds, and counting. Our status board indicates that all aspects are ready. Instrument unit is ready, spacecraft ready, final check of the emergency detection system, that ready light also on. First stage preparations are completed.
All systems okay? Okay.
Okay, keep going. And we're on. Ready to go to cockpit. Standby motor. Okay, you're on.
All systems go.
T-minus 45 seconds and counting. The first stage liquid oxygen tank has been pressurized, and the pressure's still building up. Coming up in 90 seconds, mark T-minus 90 seconds and counting. The Apollo 8 crew standing by, spacecraft commander Frank Borman, chin level Bill Anders. We now report that the liquid hydrogen tank in the third stage is pressurized. 1 minute 15 seconds. Third stage propellants pressurized at this time as we come up on the 60-second mark on the flight to the moon. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. The vehicle now is completely pressurized. We're coming up on the power transfer shortly. We have the power transfer. We're now on the flight batteries within the launch vehicle. Final reports coming from Frank Borman at this time. Final look at the space aboard the spacecraft. 20 seconds, all aspects, we are still in low at this time. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, engines are on, 4,
Apollo 8 successfully orbited the moon, and the astronauts returned safely to the Earth. I know. I'm Jim Lovell, and I was one of the crew of this spacecraft, Apollo 8. We were the first men to see the surface of the moon from just a few miles away. But it was the hundreds of thousands of men and women who worked in that team, and the millions of people who supported the mission that really made it possible. That way, I guess, we all went to the moon. Now, on the other side of those doors, you'll find an actual Saturn V moon rocket. It's still the most powerful, the most complex machine ever built. And I guess it's the only one that can take you to another planet. I actually got to fly one on a second flight to the moon called Apollo 13. But that's another story.
Langs de buitenkant kun je ook zien.
Je hebt de Maryland. En
met mij.
Ziet het er niet zo heel...
Maar dat schuift erin volgens mij.
Zal we spellen?
Nee.
Selfie?